Hi, I'm Jason Williscroft. I'm a former naval officer, U.S. Naval Academy class of 1995, and I'm the founder of RINGKNOCKER. RINGKNOCKER is a group of current and former military officers that have come together for networking, shared opportunities, and mutual fire support. So there's this sitting around in a circle talking thing we do aboard ship in the wardroom after evening chow, when we're too late to hit the rack and too caffeinated to sleep anyway, but too early to relieve the watch and too tired to do any actual work. That's called a bull session. And frankly, it's where a lot of a military officer's really practical learning happens. A few weeks ago, a couple of us RINGKNOCKERs thought we'd pick a topic and try doing that on camera. It worked out okay, so we kept doing it. Now, this is RINGKNOCKER Bull Session number 4, and our topic is the GTD machine, getting things done in a mobile, digital world. And this, by the way, is the last of our weekly bull sessions. RINGKNOCKER is growing so quickly that I need to outsource some of my process before I get crushed. So in order to give me some breathing room, we'll be moving our remaining bull sessions to a monthly basis, and we'll hold them on the last Tuesday of every month. Keep an eye on your email for more information. Now, the participants in this conversation are all military officers, and in some cases now business leaders with decades of experience managing multiple simultaneous projects, some small and some literally the size of an aircraft carrier. We are largely not formally trained in project management, but we've all had to come to terms with the need to get things done, often many things, all at once, yesterday. Now, today's discussion focuses on the getting things done methodology described by David Allen in his book of the same name. GTD was initially conceived as a paper system, but is now the governing paradigm underlying any number of task management platforms. Even so, implementations vary, and GTD aficionados struggle to find that one platform that supports GTD perfectly, frictionlessly, and effortlessly. I discovered GTD most of a decade ago, and while I loved the principles of the methodology, I was disappointed to realize again and again that the only technology that really supports it perfectly is paper. I'm a mobile technology professional. For me, that's a non-starter. Well, everything changed a few years ago with the advent of cloud-based tools like Evernote and integration services like Zapier. It began to seem possible to have my cake and eat it too. And now, years into this process, I find myself operating a GTD implementation based on a whole mashup of mobile and cloud-based tools that gives me everything I ever wanted. It is GTD, exactly the way I want it. It's frictionless. Tasking just shows up in one central inbox, whether it's started in an email, in Slack, or even on a paper letter. It's only a click away, and it fits in my pocket. There's no paper, and the only device I need to operate the thing on a daily basis is my mobile phone. Now, that's a sweet way to do business, and today, we're going to talk about how you can have it too. Go to ringknocker.net/bull to see the lineup of upcoming sessions and recordings of previous ones. And of course, keep in mind that the schedule is changing to one session a month. But for now, please enjoy RINGKNOCKER Bull Session number 4 on the GTD machine, getting things done in a mobile, digital world. Welcome to the RINGKNOCKER Bull Session, I believe, number 4. This is going to be the last weekly bull session. These are crushing me. So I'm rescheduling future sessions to go something more like monthly. That way I can focus on my, actual other jobs. But we're still going to do them. We're just going to slow them down a little bit. And I think that's going to be a bit more sustainable for me. But this is going to be a good one. If I can get myself appropriately organized here. So, raise your hand if you're familiar with GTD, with the David Allen's kind of getting things done methodology. No?
Never done it. I know it's famous.
Okay. All right. So we got kind of three ways to approach this here. All right. And we're going to do some combination of all three, but we're not going to be able to go, full bore into any one of them because we'd be here all week. So basically, on the one hand, you got just the nuts and bolts of GTD. What is it? What does it mean? How does it work? Blah, blah, blah. That's a course. All right. But if you sort of have a basic foundation in that, then you know, the rest of it's not going to make a whole lot of sense. So number two, and this is interestingly, if you went and read, you know, the first edition of Getting Things Done, you know, the David Allen's book, what you'd find is a task management system that is based entirely on paper, right? He's talking about sheets of paper and note filing cabinets and blah, blah, blah. And it's a way of kind of pushing things around on physical paper. So obviously nobody's going to do that now, right? So, so there is a question of how to go about implementing GTD on modern systems, sort of digital systems, paperless, phone apps, and blah, 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 right? So that's a whole thing in and of itself. Ron's got paper. There you go, Ron. Right, but the thing is that there are the difference between doing something on paper and doing something in, say, an app is that paper is pretty unopinionated, right? You can kind of fold it up and crumple it and write on it. You can do what you want, right? As soon as you start working inside some sort of a technological box, then it imposes its own constraints and opinions and whatnot, and that can sometimes really help, and sometimes it can really get in the way. So, so we'll talk about how to go about implementing GTD in a task manager. Some work, some don't, right? So that the features of the program have to sort of match up well with the requirements of the system. There are a few that do work well. I've got a favorite. It's less a question of picking the right one than it is a question of avoiding the wrong ones. So we can talk about that. But then the really interesting part is the automation, right? Because one of the real challenges with any kind of task management system is that you wind up with this fragmentation, right? Where you get stuff coming on an email and Slack and, you know, paper mail and all this shit. And, you know, each one kind of has its own path for handling stuff. And, you know, stuff falls through the cracks. You know, you got to look in 16 different places to find everything. And, you know, it sucks. So, so the real beauty of what I'm going to show you, let me just show you. All right. So here's where you want to get. I'm going to share my screen here. All right. So this is just a quick look ahead. You guys should be able to see my screen. I'm popping up a task manager here, okay? Now this is, and we'll talk about in a bit about what this means, but this is my task management inbox, right? This is the inbox for the program. It's called NOSB that I use to do my task management. And I want to show you what's in the inbox, okay? So first of all, I get emails, right? So here is an email that I got from somebody, and I can pop up the email in Evernote and see, there it is. It's in my task management. Boom, it's right there. I can do something with it. Here is a paper letter I got from the White House, from the IRS, right? Right. So this is that thing, right? It came in the mail, but it showed up in my task manager as a PDF. Here is, let's see. I use Slack. Anybody know what Slack is? I'm sure y'all do by now, right?
Yep. Okay.
So right, I use Slack, and my assistant had an exam, and I want to remind myself to ask her how it went. So I flagged the message in Slack, and look, I can click the link, and there it is. There's my Slack message, right? So I can handle that. Right. The point is, no matter where anything comes in from, it all winds up here. It all winds up on in the task management inbox, and so everything gets handled from a central place. So that automation is, number one, it's effortless, right? It doesn't. I've got a whole bunch of different paths that come in, and it all just kind of happens, right? I don't have to make it happen; it just happens. And number two, it eliminates all the fragmentation. So now it's all there, and I can just kind of deal with things, right? So that's the third thing, right? We've got this, when we think about kind of what we need to talk about, we've got the nuts and bolts of GTD, like just how does the system work? We've got the implementation of GTD on some platform. How do I do it now in 2020? And then we've got the automation. How do I feed it? How do I get shit into the system, right? So that's kind of a roadmap of what I want to talk about today. And I guess probably the appropriate place to start is just plain old getting things done. So one more time, raise a finger if you've either read the book or had some exposure to GTD. Okay, all right. So we're going to nutshell this, all right? And let's do it within the context of an architecture, the architecture I'm actually using, so we can kill two birds with one stone. So I'm going to share my screen again. Okay. So here's an architecture. Can you guys still see me too, or are you just looking at my screen?
No, we see.
I can see off to the side.
See me too. All right. Cool. All right. So the fundamental premise of GTD is this notion of bringing everything together into one place, right? And then only focusing on what's next, right? So it's sort of you can think of it almost as like agile personal project management, right? It's just in time task management. So do you want to have a roadmap? Do you want to have long-term plans? Yeah, sure. But when I look at my task list, when I look at my to-do list, what I'm going to see is not the 187 things that I've got to do before the end of next year, if only. Instead, what I'm going to see is the 6 things that I need to do today, right? That's it. So the point is to figure out what's next, and then of those things that are next, what actually has to be done now, and then boom, everything else, and just focus on that shit and only that shit, right? So basically, it's about what you don't see. Okay, so when we think about how that works, fundamentally, you got to get everything in there somehow, right? So whether it's on paper or whether it's on an app or what have you, there's an inbox, right? And the easiest way to think about this really is actually to think about paper, because paper is so flexible. So just imagine that you've got this stack of this inbox on your desk, right? And you got all these pieces of paper, and each one represents something that has to be done, and you just kind of shovel them into your inbox, right? So in our little system here, that's our to-do box here, right? That winds up, and we'll talk about the breakdown, information management, and task management, all that. But basically, that's the place where you're shoveling everything into, right? So once shoveled, then what you're going to do is you're going to go through those tasks and organize them into projects. So in GTD, the definition of a project is very simple. If getting something done requires more than one task, it's a project. That's really all there is to it, right? So it's very binary. Either I've got an atomic task, obviously you don't want to go too granular, right? So pick up the phone, dial the phone. Those aren't separate tasks, right? So, right, make a phone call, right? So there's some atomic level of granularity that it just has to make sense, right? But the bottom line is that if you got something that's going to take, where you're going to have to do more than one sort of correlated things, that's a project, right? And GTD doesn't really focus too much on taxonomy. I mean, I will group my projects by sort of major subject area, and like the simplest, flattest breakdown I can think of. But I'd rather have more projects than less. And I don't want to think too much about taxonomy, right? I don't want to think about what's the child of what. I want to know what I got to do next, right? Okay, so anyway, I get my stuff into an inbox. I sort my stuff out by project, right? And then each thing that's in a project, I decide, well, okay, now that I've narrowed my focus down to a particular project, and I ask the question, is this next? Is this the next thing I have to do? And if it is, I mark it so. And if it's not, then the next question is, am I ever going to do this? And if not, that's, you know, kind of someday, right? And everything in the middle, that's later, right? Right. So I'm either going to do it like the next time I do anything on this project, I'm doing this thing, that's next, or I'm probably never going to do this, but I want to have it on the list so I don't lose it. That's, you know, someday. And then, you know, the other stuff is kind of later, and I can kind of, you know, as a planning activity, I can kind of move stuff up and down in that later list and try to figure out, okay, well, what's going to be next time, right? But beyond that, that's really as deep as I go. I'm not writing any Gantt charts here, right? I'm just sort of sequencing things, right? And there are a couple other things along the way. You know, like if there are things that can be delegated, you can mark them that way. There are things that are sort of date bound. You know, like this happens every year. This happens next Tuesday, whatever. Okay, so you kind of want to mark that, right? So anyway, point is, I go through my projects and I identify, okay, what are the next tasks in all these projects, right? Then I switch my view again and I look across all projects. Okay, what are all my next tasks, right? So now I've boiled it down even further. Now I'm just looking at all the next things across all the projects. And then from those, I pick the ones I'm actually going to do today, right? That's my focus list. And it's a day's worth of stuff, right? And then, you know, I go do those things, right? So there's some rules of thumb. So for example, at each step, when I'm kind of sorting things into projects and figuring out what's next and whatnot, if I run across something I can do in 2 minutes or less, I just do it. Just knock it out, done, right? That just gets it off the list and it's just done, right? But at the end of the day, what I'm looking for is to figure out what's the short list, right? What's the stuff that I'm doing today, or maybe like, you know, this week, ideally today or tomorrow, right? And then, you know, check them off, and then this process, Matt, I know you just went through your Agile certification. The process of going through all this is called grooming, right? So this is a grooming activity. Grooming in Agile means that you're going to take an iterative pass through a set of tasks, and each time you do that, you're going to, you know, improve the list, right? Maybe you'll break things down, you'll prioritize, you know, whatever it is that you do. And in our case, we've got and I'll show you some workflows. We've got a very sort of clear-cut process for performing that grooming, right? So at the beginning of the pipeline drops a bunch of shit, right? Just disorganized shit that drops into your inbox. And at the end of the pipeline comes out a really short list of to-do list things for tomorrow, right? So that's the kind of the over-under with getting things done. Any questions on how that works? And I understand that there's a lot of material there, but no? Okay.
Just as Jace, as a point of scale, how often are you doing the task grooming?
Good question. Okay, so I groom every day, right? But I don't groom everything every day. Instead, and if you read Getting Things Done, you know, he's going to advocate a weekly. He doesn't call it grooming. He calls it something else. But basically a weekly grooming process. I do a weekly grooming process where I actually go through all my projects, everything, right? But what I've done is I've tagged certain ones of my projects as high priority ones. And so those I groom every morning, right? And the grooming process takes a grand total of like 5 or 10 minutes, right? Why? Because I did it yesterday. I did it the day before that, right? So generally speaking, I'm dealing with the top layer of, you know, something that I've already been maintaining. And so it's just sort of okay, let's get set for the day. Then once a week, I'll sit down for an hour or so and kind of hit all the projects that I've been ignoring all week long, right? And so typically what'll happen is the priority projects, you know, tasks kind of move around and get done and stuff on those, you know, on a daily basis. Once a week, I take a look at the other projects, and there may be a task from one of those other projects that, okay, this needs some focus. So even though the project's out of focus, one of its tasks will be in focus, and I'll get that done during the course of the week, and right. But I'm not actually grooming that project every day. That task is just sort of hanging out and sort of getting knocked out that week. Does that make sense? So so the answer to your question is daily, but at a fingertip level, right? That's the key is to keep this light. And again, Matt, you remember the Agile conversation that we had a few weeks ago. We talked about kind of the ratio between project management and project getting shit done, right?
Right.
So the goal here is to spend an absolute minimum amount of time on managing your shit, and virtually all of your time on actually doing the shit, right? So there's another principle here that Alan won't talk about in his book, but it's one of the things that makes all this work, and it's the idea of breaking your activities down to a point where they're literally atomic. Think about an assembly line, right? So the engine clicks forward, one step, and the guy turns a screwdriver, and then it moves on to the next thing, and the other guy hammers it, whatever, right? So point is that in the diagram that you're looking at, there's a bunch of stuff sitting in all these boxes, and that stuff is all in some state, right? And so the job of the arrow is to move the stuff in the correct state from one box to the next box, basically, right? We're moving stuff around. And so this gets easy when the thing that's getting moved around is really small, right? Because that means that you can kind of start anywhere and just pick up a couple of things and shove them around and then walk away. And, you've materially moved the ball forward, but you don't have to maintain the state in your head, right? It's just whatever's in the box. And then the next time you go, you pick up the next thing and process it, right? So, let's dive into this diagram and see if what I'm saying makes a bit more sense after we're done here. Okay, so in order to understand this, I want to make a distinction between information management and task management, right? So information management is your library, right? It's I got a bill and I'm going to need it for my taxes or invoice, and so it's got to live somewhere, right? So that when it's time to do my taxes, I can go get the invoice. I got this great email from grandma, and I know she's going to die next week, and so I want to make sure that I have a record of all my great emails from grandma so I can remember her later, right? So you want to put it someplace. That's information management. The thing about information management is, number one, it ought to be simple, right? Because you don't want to manage your information. You just want to be able to get it when you need it, right? So you shouldn't have to think too hard about how to organize stuff, and it ought to be searchable, because if things aren't very well organized, then you need a good search facility in order to get the stuff. Think about the World Wide Web, right? I mean, Google's rich for a reason. So a good tool to manage that kind of thing is pretty essential. I use Evernote. There aren't a whole lot of, I think, great alternatives. I mean, one of them is the Microsoft product, part of Office, OneNote. A lot of people use OneNote for this kind of thing. Maybe a couple of other things, but you'll see in a moment kind of how it plugs in. So that's information management. Getting to stuff that came up at some point in the past, right? Okay. On the other side, we have task management. That's the getting shit done part, right? And so getting things done, that methodology is not really about information management. It's about task management, and it's about organizing your to-dos in such a fashion that, number one, nothing gets lost, and number two, kind of you get to everything, right? So the trick here, though, is that many, if not most, of your tasks have some information behind them, right? In other words, you got an email from your boss about something that you got to do. Okay, well, the thing you got to do, that's the to-do, right? But the email, that's the context. And so that's, you kind of want to be able to get to that, right? Okay, so the way we handle it here is we use automation, okay? So let me show you here's Evernote. Raise your hand if you use Evernote for anything. All right. Okay. So Evernote is an information manager. We kind of got to that part. Think of it as a filing system, right? You've got notes, which are basically little text documents that you can attach shit to. You've got stacks, which are, forgive me. You got notes, you got notebooks, which are collections of notes, right? Then you've got stacks, which are collections of notebooks, and that's it. So it's like files inside folders, inside one more layer of folder, and that's all you get, right? That's all the hierarchy you get. In this case, that's a feature, not a bug, because it kind of prevents you, no offense, bug, because it prevents you from, from getting too wrapped around the axle in terms of organization. You can't, right? There are only so many levels that you can use here. But anyway, what happens here is I've got a notebook in Evernote called To Do, and everything that enters my system enters it as an Evernote note. And again, the platform's not really all that important. You could use OneNote and then it would be a OneNote note or what have you, but the architecture would be substantially the same. So everything that enters my system, whether it comes as a paper mail, as an email, as something I scanned, as a Slack message, as a text message I sent to myself, whatever, it all winds up as a note in Evernote, right? So all in that one inbox. So then what happens, that's here, this To Do, right? So all this stuff just kind of piles up in To Do. So what happens then is I've got some automation, and I use a platform called Zapier to do this, right? This happens automatically, okay? When a new note gets created in Evernote, in To Do, Zapier picks it up and goes, oh, look, here's something new. I'm going to create a new task in my task manager inbox. And I use something called Nosby as my task manager, right? So basically there's a one-to-one parity. New note in the Evernote To-Do thing, new task in Nosby, right? It's one-to-one. And so when I go into Nosby, for each one of these guys, let me get this out of the way so I can see. When I go into Nosby for each one of these guys, so here's a task in my Nosby inbox, right? So look, it comes in, because Zapier does this for me, it comes in with the text content of the note and then a link to the Evernote app that'll take me straight to that note, right? So basically every task has a note in Evernote backing it up, right? So now, when I think about, all right, how do I handle my task? And remember I said, oh, if you got something you can handle in 2 minutes, then just handle it. Well, a very common task for me is, here's something I want to keep. My task is file it, right? So in other words, I'll click over to Evernote and say, all right, let's use a better example. This thing I got from the White House, right? From the IRS, right? This PDF, right? About my economic impact payment, right? So that's just, it's a PDF. I want to file it someplace, for my taxes, right? So I can just, drop it into my, taxes notebook and done, right? I've filed it, I've put it where it needs to go, and then I can just check off the task and that task is complete, right? So many of your tasks, if you will, really break down to, I got this thing I want to hold on to, let me put it where it belongs. Occasionally things will creep into your inbox that you just don't care about, in which case just check off the task and you're done, right? Like my task is, oh, recognize that there's no task, move on, right? But then occasionally I'm going to have things that actually require some attention beyond just holding on to them. So for example, here, I created a manual note. Oh, look, Chris, you're a candidate. I created a manual note here, just sort of a list of prospective sponsors for RINGKNOCKER, right? And so, okay, I mean, it's a start, right? I'm going to want to do something with this at some point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, move Chris out of the way here. I'm going to take my, and we'll talk about the nuts and the mechanics of this in a bit, but I'll take my task. I'll say, all right, that's part of RINGKNOCKER, my RINGKNOCKER marketing project. There we go. And I'm going to make it next just to give it some visibility, and boom, I'm done. I've sorted that task and I'm moving on to the next one, right? So that's me processing my inbox, and that's part of the grooming process, right? So, so basically then, I start out with this pile of stuff in Evernote, which becomes tasks. I groom those tasks, and I either, do the stuff, and eventually, if there's stuff to be done, it does have to be done, right? It's not just about pushing stuff around. Or I file it into a project, and then we'll get into project grooming, or I, schedule it on a calendar, right? And put a date on it, and instead of doing it now, I'll do it then, right? So this is the sort of the high level architecture of what we're talking about. There's some workflows that matter, okay? So one of the main sources that we have for tasking in our world is email, right? How do you get to inbox 0, right? So that's the email grooming process, and we'll dig into that, right? I know, because I see you laughing, Chris. How many emails you got in your inbox?
Well, I did a clean out today, so I'm down to below 20. But there's some that have been there, even though I've done a clean out. Probably they've survived multiple clean outs, right? It's not supposed to be that way. David Allen would kill me.
You've read the book, right? So there's a point that he makes. Oh, you didn't?
But I think the inbox supposed to be 0 every day, right?
Inbox 0 is awesome, and here's why. So this is just sort of human psychology, right? If you've got a task that's hanging out there, then it's holding a piece of your attention, right? Like you're kind of maintaining a mental state for that thing, right? And an email sitting in an inbox, especially if it's buried, so it's there, but you're not quite sure, you're gonna have to go look for it sometime, right? It's holding a piece of your attention. Now, contrast that with what Alan calls a trusted system, right? So the whole point of this, pile of projects and all that stuff is to be a trusted repository for tasks, which basically means that when I get something on the email and comes into the inbox and I file it into a project, I have learned now through long experience that once I do that, that thing is never going to get lost, right? It's never going to get ignored. I might not get to it for a while. I'm much better at organizing my tasks and making sure nothing gets lost than actually maybe executing on tasks. But when I get to it, it's going to be there. So what does that mean for me? As long as I've got a strong process and practice of grooming, which means that eventually I'm going to see it again, probably soon, right? And as long as I've got the kind of repository where I'm literally guaranteed that nothing gets lost, once I put it where it belongs, what can I do? I can forget about it. Forget about it.
It's safe.
Which means that on any given day, those 6 things or whatever, those 6 tasks that are on my, my focus list for the day, that's the only thing in my head. Everything else is somewhere else, somewhere where I don't have to think about it, right? So that's the power. That's the point of the system, is to get all that shit out of your head, and someplace where you can be 100% certain that when you need to get it back into your head, you can, right? So inbox 0 for that reason is the goal of email grooming. And I don't get there every day. I probably get there 4 or 5 times a week, right? So that's that alone for me is enough to sell me on something like this, right? So all right, so we'll get into the grooming workflow, because that's a thing. The automation, we talked about this, right? So I showed you some examples of how stuff shows up in the inbox from other places. The list of places that it could come from is literally endless, right? I mean, what do I use? I use a mail service called Earth Class Mail in order to receive and scan my paper mail. I use Slack a lot for lots of different things. I occasionally use a couple of CRM systems, various other things. Point is, other sources besides email, somehow that stuff's got to get into your inbox. no matter how you do it, somehow you got to get it into your inbox.
Earth class mail, like you have your mail delivered there and they like scan it and send it to you?
Earth class mail is awesome. So if you take nothing else away from this, if you're ever actually not at home, it's the thing to have. So basically Earth class mail is a service, and you have to fill out like a postal form to give them kind of a postal power of attorney to receive your mail, right? But they can give you one or several physical addresses in the U.S., right? So I've got two. I got one in Chicago and one in Miami. You can use them as your business address. You're not supposed to use them as your physical address for banks and stuff. It's a thing. It's called a PMB, a personal mailbox, and that doesn't quite count as a physical address, but you can do it anyway. I do it all the time. But basically, when you get something there, letters, packages, whatever, right? They scan the outside, and then I'll show it to you. Here, hang on. I'll show you what it looks like.
As bad as my post office is delivering to my physical address, it might mean I actually get things.
Oh, dude, you have no idea how cool this is. This is
I gotta get this.
It's the best thing in the world.
My mail piles up.
Oh, not only
you want to talk about stuff that doesn't get touched.
Dude,
my inbox has
service.
a much better chance. You know how much I'm paying
all your
my
employees
attorney?
Can have a box. Yeah, a lot,
my
right?
attorney, I forget to. He's my registered agent, right? He sends me he spends however many hours sending me a letter to tell me I'm a delinquent. I'm like, dude, pick up the phone and freaking call me. I'll take care of it. But I'm going to pay him.
Okay.
How much money?
So this is my Earth class mail inbox, right? So what happens here is when something arrives, they will, depending on how you set up the rules, automatically open it and scan it if it's a letter, right? Or if it's less than 6 or 10 pages. They'll open it up and they'll scan it. And then what you see is you see the outside of the envelope and what's inside, right? And you can you can download it as a PDF or what have you. What I've done is I've created a pipeline that goes from Earth class mail to Dropbox, and then from Dropbox to Evernote, and puts it into my system, right? But whatever. The point is, you got multiple addresses. Anybody can send anything to those addresses. If it's small enough, they'll open it and scan it. If it's like a magazine or something, they'll send you a note and say, hey, this is too big to scan. What do you want us to do with it? You can have them shit can it. You can have them shred it. You can have them deposit checks. You can have them package a bunch of stuff up and ship it to you physically wherever you happen to be. So basically, this disintermediates you from whoever's sending you shit, right? It's a central collection point for your mail. So for example, I use it in Indonesia. When if I order new contact lenses, and we're reading glasses now, but if I order new contact lenses, they go to Earth class mail first. Earth class mail repackages them and then ships them to Indonesia for me, right? So they're kind of a mail collector, and then they ship it off to wherever you are. But what I find is that they send me almost nothing physical, right? Virtually everything I receive in the mail is either junk, and I just have to shred it. That's a button you click. It's very satisfying.
That's a satisfying button you hit.
Yeah, or I get the PDF and it just shows up on my task manager and I deal with it, right? So it costs they just kind of refactored their services. So it had the level of service that I have runs me about $110 or $120 a month. They've got like a smaller kind of personal service. It just depends on what your mail volume is. But they can also do they can be your mail room. So if you get if you got 6 employees and each one receives mail for different reasons, everybody can have their own inbox, and you can like pass things from one inbox to another, and it's awesome. So Earth class mail, highly recommend it. I can show you how to do the automation from Earth class mail to wherever it needs to go. That's sort of a whole different topic. But as a service, even if you don't automate it, even if you just use it as is, it's freaking brilliant. So yeah, the price of this call is not satisfied. I'm telling you, because the thing is, it doesn't matter where you are. You can move, you can go on deployment, you can go on vacation, whatever. All your stuff is right there. It's like email for atoms instead of bits. Okay, so that's request mail. Yes,
bits
awesome.
are atoms too.
Are atoms
on some level?
They're atomic. Okay, I don't want to get into that. All right, all right. Okay, so let's see. Let's go back to our diagram. Okay, so so the automation is a thing, and we'll kind of towards the end we'll jump on a Zapier, and I'll show you what it looks like. I can't. There's no way I'm going to be able to teach you how to do all this here, right? So what I want you to see here is sort of the art of the possible, right? Okay.
I mean, Jason, is this a prototype you're doing here, or is this a?
No, I've been running this. I've been running this thing for. Now, obviously, this is something I've built for myself.
So do you have to have like a full stack, right? I mean, it's literally a stack, right, of different software.
It's a stack, but one of the things that I'm trying to get across to you guys is that as is true of any stack, the specifics are interchangeable, right? So like information management could be Evernote, could be OneNote, could be probably a few other things, right?
Yeah.
Task management could be Nozbe, could be, honestly,
Outlook.
I don't think Asana works very well, but Outlook, point is there are lots of different task managers that you can use here, right?
My wife.
Automation, you could use, I mean, I like Zapier. You could use the Azure version. Like, again, there are different ways that you can do this, right? So I want to focus on the boxes that stuff is in, right? And then, if we want to learn about the specifics of, okay, well, what do you use here and why do you use it and how do you make that specific connection? That's definitely something we can show. But prototype, always a work in progress because all these services change over time. So for example, Slack used to have a like button. Now it's got a save button. And for some reason, the save button sends me things twice. But now they also have a send a Zapier button, and I just haven't refactored to use that, right? Long story short, I've been doing this now for probably 5 years. So the system has greatly refined, and now it's effortless, right? So things just show up, and I deal with them. The grooming and management process that's manual, right? That's me doing stuff, and worth talking about as distinct from the automation, because you can use it without the automation, right? You can be the automation. You can sort of send things, to yourself as necessary. And what we're going to find here is that much of the automation is pretty simple. So, for example, in Outlook, you can have a save to Evernote button, right? So if I, for some reason, wanted to keep this email about Hugh Jackman, I could just save it to my to-do. In fact, here, let's do it. So I just saved an email to my to-do notebook in Evernote. Zapier picks things up every 5 minutes. So what's going to happen is within the next 5 minutes, that thing is going to show up here in my inbox, and then I can probably just check it off because I don't want to do anything with it, but I could if I wanted to, right? So so that kind of effortlessness, it's like any other system, right? The easy, it's a basic economics. The easier it is, the more of it you're going to get. Easier, cheaper, what have you, right? So if you eliminate the friction from moving things around and managing things, then what you're going to find is that management gets easier and you do more of it. And when you do more of it, guess what? Things get better because they're managed, right? So it's a little bit like, I know we've done nothing if not project management, right? What's your main job as a project manager? It's to eliminate roadblocks, to get things out of people's way, right? If if people are, reasonably good at their jobs, and if they don't have shit standing in their way, then, they're going to do their jobs. Well, the same is true of you, right? So this is about project managing yourself. This is about eliminating roadblocks that prevent you from managing your shit. And, when you eliminate those, guess what you do? You manage your shit more. And when you manage your shit more, then your shit's managed, and, and you wind up having less stuff in your head, and, life gets better, right? So even though we're focused on kind of, nitty gritty little technical things, these are precisely the things that prevent us from actually managing our shit, right? Like, oh, I got emails over here, and, Slack over here, and, I gotta go to 6 different places to do stuff, as opposed to I gotta go to one place, right? So that was the operating principle behind it. And what I found in practice is, yep, it works exactly that way. Like, when I can actually focus on things in one place instead of 6 places, more things happen. Chris, you want to talk about Inbox Zero? I'll show you how to get there. Watch this.
Yeah, I remember there's some place I worked over 10 years ago. Well, not that long, maybe 5 years ago. Sent some people to David Allen. I wasn't picked.
Okay.
But they put weird characters in their emails so that they could sort by them or something weird. I
don't do any of that shit. I mean, I guess you could, but I just don't. It's too complicated, right? I mean,
if it required, if you send an email that required a reply, you'd put a hashtag R or something down in the footer or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I can see, but I can specifically see how automation can pick that up and do something with it. I'm just not sure. I'm not sure I'd do it, right? Like I always have to, whenever I look at any of this stuff, I have to evaluate it against kind of my model of myself.
Yeah.
Which is, I'm aware of kind of what in practice I will and won't do. I'm 50, right? Like I know what I'm going to do, right? Yeah. I know what I'm not going to do, right? So am I really going to put a little hashtag and everything? No, I just won't. I mean, I think it's a good idea, but I won't do it. And if I know I'm not going to do it, then I need to create a system organized around what I will do rather than around what I won't do, right? Because because that's just a road to failure. So this for me is, and again, everybody's different, right? But this for me, we talked about anti-fragility last week, right? So one of the biggest sources of volatility, maybe the biggest source of volatility, is time, right? You let any process be out in the world for long enough, and the world is going to figure out how to break it, right? So a process that's been out there for a few years and has not broken, that to me is evidence of solidity, and that's what we got here. But Chris, what you're looking at here is this is the grooming process for email, and it hardly needs a flowchart, but the outcome is Inbox Zero, right? So what does it mean to handle an email? That's the big question, right? Typically, if I have an email in my inbox, like the standard mode of thinking is that handling the email means do what's in it, right? So if your wife sends you an email that says, "Hey, Chris, you ought to write a novel," then what? It's going to sit in your inbox until you've written a freaking novel?
Yeah.
No, right? So that's not a good model, right? It's not a good model. It's not a good model for what constitutes handled, right?
Yeah.
So for us, handled means one of a couple of things. It means handled, right? In other words, if I can do it in 2 minutes, done. Deleted, right? Which is most of them, right? Like, this is bullshit. I don't need it. I don't care. Gone. It's junk, right? Or it means threw it in my inbox. I threw it into the system, right? Because once it's in the system, guess what? I trust the system. I trust the system. It might not get done for a while, depends, but it won't get lost, right? So I throw it into the system, and then I archive it, and it's gone, right? So the bottom line is, if I've got 100, 200 emails in my inbox, which thankfully doesn't happen much anymore, I can work through them in 10 minutes. And, and at the end of it, my inbox is empty. My email inbox is empty. Right?
And that's what's happening under the hood for you.
That's what's happening, right?
In your system, for me, the magic here is that this place called To Do is a place that you have confidence results in good outcomes.
100% confidence, right? So now instead of maintaining the state, I got this email about the novel. It's like 1,000 emails down in my inbox, but I know it's there and I got to get to it eventually. Now it's there. Maybe I've got a next task associated with my novel project now. Like go research a topic or something. It's getting handled, right? But I don't have to maintain that state. And so instead, when I approach my email inbox every day, instead of looking at the big giant stack and saying, okay, how much of this do I have to look at right now? Instead, my criteria for what do I have to look at is what's in the inbox. And how do I know when I'm done? It's empty. Simplest criteria conceivable, right? Okay, so now the question becomes, all right, now it's in a different inbox. What do I do with it then? Let's take a look at that. So here's our task workflow. Now, we're making some assumptions here, okay? And if you're implementing this thing exactly, then it's a good assumption. The fundamental assumption is that behind every task is some information, a note, Evernote, whatever, right? But however you do it, we can at least understand that we can get to the contextual information behind a task, right? Like that's the idea. However you manage your set. In Alan's paper system, it would all be on one piece of paper, whatever, right? Anyway, the point is, I've got an inbox of tasks. In other words, this thing, right? I got some stuff that came in the door. And that stuff is coming from all sorts of different places, right? It's emails and paper and whatever. It's a pile of shit, right? That's the nature of work. You start with a pile of shit and you organize it, right? Okay. So, right?
Sounds like physics.
It is. But here's the thing though, right? Each one of these tasks is atomic, right? So I can, if I'm pressed for time, I can deal with the top 3 and the other 4, and the other 4 are still going to be there, right? So this is a key point of this system and any other system like this that's going to work reliably. If you've got a batch of stuff, you shouldn't have to do the whole batch in order to make progress. You ought to be able to do just a little bit and, you move the ball. So every single thing that's in my inbox, if I process it, I've moved the ball that much forward. I can walk away. I don't have to maintain mental state because the state is right here in the inbox. Well, there's 6 more. See what I'm saying? So I don't have to think about what remains because what remains is right there remaining, right? It's all that has to happen. I can just come back to it and there it is. I'll deal with the next one when I got another minute. I can do this on my phone, because there's an app for this thing. So I can, hey, I'm in an elevator for a minute. What's at the top of my inbox? And it's done. Okay. And I walk away and I've just moved the ball that much forward, right? So that's a key point here. Not having to maintain state between activities, right? Okay. So anyway, kind of the same as the email thing. Is there anything left in the inbox? If there is, let's take a look at the next task. Can I do it in 2 minutes? Remember what's happening here, right? Like just like with email, but now I got stuff coming from other places besides email, right? So I asked the same question. Can I just knock this out? Like whatever it is, much of the stuff that I can just knock out is like that letter from the IRS. Oh, I just have to put this someplace. Done, right? Just put it there and done, check the box, right? Other things, maybe there's something you just got to put it on your calendar. Okay, done. Knock it out, right? So the key there is don't spend a lot of time organizing trivial shit, right? If it's trivial, just do it. It'll be done, right? So that's just, high level principle, but it works. Okay. And obviously if I'm done, then okay, go on to the next one. So and that's gonna include most of the ones that involve filing just kind of raw information for storage, right? So then you get into the meat of it. All right, well, this is a thing that has to actually, something has to happen here. Like somebody's got to do something here. Okay. So what do I do? Okay. So remember that in GTD, I've basically got two kinds of things. I've got tasks and I've got projects. A project is, you know, any sort of connected, correlated set of tasks where there's going to be more than one of them, right? So I've got several kind of, let's call them standing projects. So like marketing for RINGKNOCKER, right? I mean, there's always stuff I got to do for marketing. So it's like a bin that I throw things in, right? Whereas sometimes, you know, I've got a specific project like the franchisor Shark Tank, right? I mean, I created a project there because, you know, I had some stuff that had to be done that was specific to that. And, you know, there's a little organization, not much, right? So if I look at my project list, you'll see that these are my, here, let's open it up. So these are all my projects here, right? And you'll see that the left-hand token, the left-hand word is consistent across many of them, right? So that's the main thing that they belong to, the Enterprise Data Foundation, my personal stuff, Tiny Poems, don't ask, Splice Logic, RINGKNOCKER, RK, right? So, right? So you know, they're all related. They're all kind of part of the same, call it an organization, right? And then the next word specifies sort of, all right, well, what is this thing, right? What's the actual project? And then if I have to break a thing down into, call them sub-projects, I'll add a third token. Like here, my travel to Bali, right? There was actually, you know, there were several others. I've sort of, you know, archived those because they don't apply anymore. But you see, so just a basic, it's a list. It's a list of projects, and the naming convention contains all the organization you're ever going to need, right? So simple. Okay, so when I think about this next task in my inbox, what am I going to do? I'm going to put it in a project, right? So here, let's actually do one. Okay, so it turns out that Zoom is going to force everybody into the waiting room on calls starting sometime in July, which is going to suck. And I'm not quite sure how to deal with it, but I have to because, you know, it's RINGKNOCKER. So I'm going to put that into RINGKNOCKER meetups, right? There's a project for it to go into, right? And as a matter of practice, everything that goes from the inbox into a project first gets a next status. Why? Because that way I'm going to look at it next, right? We're going to deal with that kind of first when I start grooming projects, right? If there's anything else that I need to know about it, like a due date, you know, maybe it's some recurring thing, whatever, fine, I'll do it here. But other than that, done. Notice that it's gone from the inbox, right? So now when it's time to groom those projects, I'll see it again. But I trust it's going to be there. And so for right now, I don't care. It's out of my head, right? I can focus on the other stuff in the inbox. At some point, I clear the inbox out. And now guess what? I'm at task inbox 0. Done. Okay. So that's, in terms of handling the task inbox, that's it. Roundy, right? When I'm out of tasks in my inbox, I'm done. And now I'm into grooming, and we'll talk about that next. But the point is that once again, I don't have this, you know, 1,000 items just kind of sitting there, all in a different state, all kind of like how I don't know what's next, and right, done. They're gone, right? Why is that possible? How is that possible? Because I did it yesterday, and I did it the day before. I did it last week, right? Yeah, no, seriously. I mean, you know, and this is if you read Alan's book, and by the way, it's paper-based, doesn't matter. Strongly recommend it because it's a high-level philosophy that applies to really any kind of a platform, right? But you know, when you read through it, one of the big questions is, how do I start, right? Because you got to get from I'm not on it to I'm on it, and somewhere in the middle is like 50,000 to-do items, right? And the answer is, just do it, brother. right? So what you do is, in the paper version, you grab a ream of paper and you start writing shit down, like one per sheet. You throw them all into the inbox, and then once you've like got all the shit out of your head and onto that paper, then you just start going through the inbox. Like you create some folders for projects, and you just right. And when you're done, your inbox is empty. Things are more or less sorted into projects, and then you kind of run it from there. And because it's a weekly and daily grooming cycle, even though you did a shit job the first time because you were in a hurry and you had 10,000 items, over time it gets better, right? Because you keep revisiting the same stuff over and over, right? So over a period of time, you're going to go from, I got it. It's like shit's in the wrong projects, and stuff is like later when it should be someday, and the next stuff is all fuck it. It's done enough, right? Done enough that you can then next week come back to it, groom it some, it'll get better. And after you've been doing it for a few months, it's like, yeah, I spend 5 minutes a day on this and I'm good. So it is a practice, right? It's not just a thing you carry around in your pocket. It's a practice. It's like working out. It only works when you go to the gym, right?
So Jace, quick question. So how do you take something from a meeting where you say, aha, I've got to do X, and it doesn't have that intake, information management token. So how does that play in your workflow?
So let's just game it out, right? So you went to a meeting, you sat down, you grabbed a piece of paper, you wrote some shit down, right? Okay. So I got an app on my phone called Scannable. It's one of those phone scanning apps, right? It connects well into Evernote, right? And by default, hang on a second. All right, so bear with me. I got my phone here. I'm going to pull up Scannable, and I'm going to scan. I've got this menu for a wardroom down the street, and let's say that this is a very important note. So I'm going to scan it and send it to Evernote, and done. Okay, so I just sent this thing to Evernote, right? And it's on my phone, so I'm going to do this manually, but it would normally take a minute or two for Evernote to get around to syncing it. There, it's done. To syncing it with the cloud, right? But okay, so you're still looking at my screen, right? Yeah. All right, so let's go to Evernote and let's sync. And here. Okay, so here's a scannable document. There is the thing that I just scanned, right? It's in my to-do stack. Okay, so now what's going to happen is sometime within the next 5 minutes, this thing is going to show up as a task. Now I'm going to shortcut the process just because we're in demo land here, right? So I'm gonna go to Zapier and I'm just gonna run that. I'm gonna run that thing. Like I said, they run every 5 minutes, but I'm just gonna go there and run it manually just to make it happen. So there. Okay, so this would normally have happened within 5 minutes, but we're just doing it right away. And then let's refresh Nosby. And it'll take a moment for it to show up.
So you're creating the digital artifact. And in this case, you directly ported it over to your Evernote. Yeah.
Now I did this manually because I wanted to show you guys. But if I just waited 5 minutes, I started, boom, I scanned it with my phone. 5 minutes later, it's just going to show up here and look. So now it's in my inbox, and if I want to see it, I can click and boom, there it is. I can see it in Evernote, right? So the process, the beginning of the process is, hang on, looking for you. Oh, there you guys are. So the beginning of the process is I scan the piece of paper, it shows up on my task list, right? So now here it is in my inbox, and what's my task? My task is break these notes out and figure out what to do with them, right? Like I've got a page of notes. There are probably tasks in there. Go find them, right? So when I, when I'm looking at the inbox thing here, I'm going to spend my 2 minutes. And I'm going to go, okay, well, there are three kind of to-dos on this thing. Let me create a couple of new tasks in Nozbe, in the task manager. Let me create a couple of new tasks and throw them in the appropriate project. And then I'll close that scan because I'm done with it. My task, the task that thing represented was process this scan, figure out what to do.
Okay.
Right? Yeah, so close that.
Create the artifact you need, and then you're generating tasks in Nozbe.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, and then from there, I'm back to my standard grooming process, right?
Okay.
Right. So to go back to okay, so let's assume that we've emptied our inbox, right? And now the question is, all right, now what? And this is the daily / weekly sort of grooming process, right? So I've got all these projects here, right? And what I've done is I've added just a very simple, I've added just a very simple layer of organization on these high focus, right? So basically I'm saying, hey, these are the projects that I actually care about on a daily basis. I'm only going to revisit the other ones weekly, right? So let's work through the daily grooming cycle, right? So what am I going to do? I'm going to click through my projects, and each one of these guys has got a status associated with it. I've got a limited number of statuses. I've got next, soon, and someday. Next means, within the context of this project, that's the next thing, right? Occasionally there are ties where like two things kind of have to be done simultaneously or whatever, but generally speaking, it should be like one thing in the project is next. Someday means I may never do this, but I don't want to lose track of it, right? And then soon is everything in between, right? What else can I have? Delegate. That means find somebody to do this, right? Maybe, it means, yeah, do I have to do it next? Yeah, I still got to do it next, but I don't want to do it myself. I want to find somebody else to do it. I've got schedule, which means, look, I want to think about this now, but I want to start thinking about it on this day, right? So when I tell it scheduled and give it a date, that's the date when it sort of pops back into my visibility, right?
Does that when you say it pops back in, Jace, does that pop back in on box in Nozbe?
Yeah, and I'll explain how that works. Yeah,
that's
right?
pretty key.
Yeah, and this is a key distinction between things like Nozbe, and there are a few task managers that are equally good, and things that aren't, right? Like Asana is not, right? And
yeah,
so
that pulled my question to the end because I looked at going Asana. Yeah. So you can go more on that, but that's is a good place to explain that difference.
Asana so Asana is a great platform. A lot of people use it. It's highly sort of interoperable. You can assign tasks to other people and whatnot. It's great, right? But there are a couple of key capabilities that do not work on Asana, at least not very well, right? And whereas on a platform like this, which is really built for GTD, they're fundamental to the platform, and you can kind of force Asana to do this, but you got to twist yourself into so many knots. It's not worth it. Now, trust me, I've tried. I would love to be on Asana, but I can't because it doesn't do this shit.
Cool.
Anyway,
thanks.
So the point is the key sort of statuses for this part of the discussion is this next versus later versus someday, right? So so I'm gonna click through all of my projects, and I'm gonna identify, if any, like what's the next thing. Some projects have no next thing. Like it's all later. Like I don't want to deal with this right now, and there's nothing on this thing that I want to have anything to do with right now. I just want to maintain the list. Okay, right? Okay, so once I've worked through all of my projects, right? And beyond just marking the next, there's other things I can do. Like, okay, so these 5 things are later, but can we spend a minute and just think about which one would be first? maybe be like that, maybe be like that, right? So just like
That's
some basic sequencing, like, right? So like, okay, it's not next now, but you know, which one is next, right? That kind of thing, right? So that's just kind of basic sequencing, not a freaking Gantt chart, right? Like none of that waterfall shit. Just like a basic idea of kind of, what's sort of next up. Okay. So now this is where it gets really cool. Okay. Because now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at all my next stuff across all projects, right? So in other words, across every single project that you just saw, what you're looking at now is a list of all the stuff that's next. Okay. And now I'm like, oh, wow. Well, that's important. That's not, you know, I mean, you know, just because something's next in a project doesn't necessarily mean that that project is worth working on right now, right? Like maybe it's just, yeah, it's the next thing, but who cares, right? So
project's not a priority. I mean, that's only true if the project itself is not a high priority.
Yeah. And, you know, sometimes you've got low priority projects that still have something that kind of has to be done right now.
Yeah,
you know, like, right?
Urgent.
So exactly. So however that works out, what I'm doing here is I'm going to take a look at this pretty short list, right? I'm going to take a look at this short list and go, okay, so I know all this stuff is high priority. It's all next, right? Like it all kind of, in order to move that ball forward, that's what I'm going to have to do. Now the question is, which ball do I want to move forward, right? So I can kind of move things around and figure it out. And then you see these stars off to the side. This is about focus, right? So in other words, once I've got that figured out, once I've got an idea of, all right, now what am I going to work on today? How about that one? I can't do this one today because it's going to take me all day and I can't do anything else if I do it. So we'll do that later. This one, and that one. And then I'm going to go to my focus list. And my focus list contains only the stuff, there was some other stuff that had stars too, but only the stuff that has stars, only the focus items. That's the only list I ever look at 90% of the time. This is all I see, right? Now, what's happened here is it's been a couple of days and I've had some stuff pile up, but typically I'm not going to see, plus I'm doing this morning instead of grooming, but typically I'm not going to see more than half a dozen, maybe 8 items or so on this list. And how do I win my day? I win the day when these are all checked off, right? So part of this process is about setting yourself up for success, setting yourself up so that every day, at the end of the day, you can go, I won because I said I was going to do these things and I did it. Not, I had 1,000 things in my to-do list and I made 0.1% progress. That sucks, right? But instead, I chose these things and they're done. That's winning the day. And it's immensely satisfying. Big time, right? So, but in order to do that, you have to figure out what are those things going to be, right? Not just whatever comes into my head, but what actually, like, let's do this on purpose. Like if I behaved on purpose all day long, what things would I do? Oh, it'd be these things. Okay, do these things and you're done, right? So now, Matt, you asked about the date stuff. Like, what did I mean when I said it comes into your field of view? Well, what happens is, and again, this is Nosby. There are other platforms, and all similar platforms have an equivalent functionality here, okay? But basically, if I have a task that has a date associated with it, right? Then what happens is, on that date, it gets a priority star. That's it. So don't think of it as the date that it's due, unless you plan to do it at the last minute, right? Think of it as the date that you want it to rise to your level of attention so that you can figure out what to do with it, right? So for example, let's say that I've delegated something to my assistant and I want to ping her about it next week. all right, I'm going to set a date. So what have I done? I've delegated it to Tiz, and it's out of my head, right? And I'm not going to unstart, because if I do, it's going to go away from this list. Actually, there. So it's not starred now, but tomorrow it will be, right? Tomorrow it's going to acquire a star. And remember, I spend 90% of my time on this priority list, right? That's how I know I'm done, right? So tomorrow it's just going to appear on my list, right? I don't have to think about the date. It's just going to happen. So, so really at the end of the day, then what am I doing all day? I'm walking around, you know, I'm checking what's on my NOSBI list, right? And, you know, and I'm doing those things. I can also kind of sequence these guys. So, you know, as I'm setting up for my day, I'm like, oh, I'm going to do these two first, and I'm going to be sick and tired of this shit. So I'm going to do something else as a palate cleanser. And then, you know, and I'll wrap up the day with that stuff. Right. So I can sequence the focus items as well. And they kind of maintain that sequence independently of the, you know, the next item sequence and the rest of it, right? So each of those sequence sets are sort of independent. So so that's the process, right? So, you know, going back to kind of the main categories of shit, right? So the nuts and bolts of GTD, that's this whole idea of I've got an everything inbox, I've got projects, and I've got tasks, and I want to get everything out of my head and into this trusted system. That's the nuts and bolts of GTD, and kind of go read the book. You won't regret it.
Hey, Jace, I would actually add one thing to that. I think one of the principles, at least for how I function and dysfunction sometimes, is intentionally taking stuff out of view. You know, that, you know, you get to that focus list, and unlike, you know, you've got all this information technology, which in some ways I feel plays to bad habits for some of us. Having everything in view is mentally draining, is stressful, and can get you distracted when you don't want to be distracted. And to me, that is on top of those three things you just threw out.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. And you know, that is used properly. That's the significant power of technology, right? Is that when I'm just operating on my own, I can't put something out of sight, out of mind, right? I can't put it out of sight without putting it out of mind. And, you know, if there's shit that has to be done, then my fear is always that if I put it out of my mind, it's never going to come back in, right? Whether it's paper or, you know, some app, good technology in this context is technology that lets you put something out of sight without losing it.
Right.
Right. And so, you know, I mean, paper works, right? I mean, that's why we got wheel books, right? So we can write shit down, and right. But the trouble is now you got to make sure you find the right page, right? You know, a bit more structure like this, it gives you the ability to put stuff out of your sight and get it out of your head, but still have confidence that it'll come back around when you need it to. Because if you don't have that confidence, it'll never truly leave your head, right? It'll always be there. It'll always be like, I got to remember this. And, you know, and I mean, you add enough things and that becomes the bulk of what's in your head, right? So there's enormous power in just getting it all out in a manner that you trust so well that you don't think about it anymore. And it's a quality of life issue as much as any. I mean, does it make you more effective? Yeah, I'm sure it does. But it's also just like, you know, not experiencing the stress of having to hang on to that stuff is I think really, really key. Okay. So nuts and bolts, the implementation, and we talked just now, I showed you kind of what does GTD look like on NOSBI, right? And I really like this tool. It also is multi-user, so you know you can assign things and whatnot. This is my preferred one. There are a small number of other ones that you might also look at. I sort of evaluated everything, like the web app, the desktop app, the phone app, blah, blah, blah. And I mean, this is the one I chose, but I'm sure there are others. Interoperability is a big one. If you want to automate stuff, then you've got to have a way to get things into, your task manager in an automated fashion. And Nosby's is actually pretty low tech, right? It's an email. So you get this Nosby email address and you send an email into Nosby with an appropriately formatted subject line and whatnot, and it works. But the beauty of automation is you can automate that too. So so what actually happens when I drop something into the Evernote to-do list is Zapier picks up the Evernote note, converts it into an email, and then sends that email to Nosby in order to get it into this system. So anyway, so that's the implementation, like the next and later and someday and all that kind of thing. And then there's the inbound pipeline, right? And that's really when we get into the that's this part, right? The inbound automation that takes things that show up in various places like Earth Class Mail and Slack and whatnot, and shovels them into the information inbox, right? So we're down to 10 minutes. I'm happy to take any questions, or if you'd like to see specific details, I'm happy to walk you through. Like one thing you guys might want to see is sort of a bit more detail about the automation and how those pathways work. I can walk you through some stuff on Earth Class Mail, whatever your interest is. So please just fire away.
Jace, I think my one last question is how do you balance or integrate between your task management and your schedule calendar management, like events?
Yeah. So the short answer is calendars are pretty simple, right? I mean, the nature of a well-managed calendar is that there's not too much shit on it, because if there is, you can only be in one place at one time, right? So if you've got yourself scheduled for 6 different things at the same time, that's the problem. That's the point of application, right? It's not the
Sure.
How do I manage 6 things at once? It's why do I have 6 things scheduled at the same time, right? So once you agree that you're not going to do that, then your calendar problem becomes a whole lot simpler. And so honestly, I've got multiple enterprises going. And so each one kind of has its own kind of calendar, right? Mostly on Office, right? So, if I go into my Outlook, each of these across the top here is a separate Outlook calendar, and they all kind of superimpose, right? I use a lot of integration tools. Like I don't know if any of you have ever scheduled. Ron, you have scheduled a call with me. I use Calendly for scheduling calls, and that plugs into Microsoft Office and a few other things. So basically, when somebody schedules a call with me, it's automatically the times when I've got something already on my calendar are blocked out, right? So they slot into open slots. Another thing that I do is I block my time. So for example, just looking at my calendar here, you'll see that there are a lot of blocks that they're blocks of time, but you see the white border there, they're free time, right? Their schedule is free rather than busy, right? So these are blocks of time that if you were to try to schedule a call with me, that time would be available, but I'm planning to do certain things at those times unless somebody schedules a call with me, right? So it gives me kind of a high level method of organizing my time. And when I think about the stuff on the to-do list, that's kind of, all this stuff kind of falls into certain categories, and those are sort of when I work on those categories, right? So, one of my fundamental principles is I don't like thinking too hard about stuff, right? I would much rather have things architected in such a fashion that the architecture drives things instead of me having to fight against the architecture, right? So, so I'm a good little employee, and I kind of do what my calendar says. And the fact that I'm also my boss and putting the shit on my calendar doesn't seem to faze the employee at all, right? So, so I wear one hat when I schedule myself, and I wear another hat when I actually do the shit.
All right, thanks. Got it.
What else?
How about storage? You use Dropbox or Box, that kind of thing?
So I use, it depends on the storage. So I do use Dropbox, but I use Dropbox transactionally. Now, what I mean is that Dropbox is one of those, it's one of those cloud services that connects really well with other things. And so, for example, Earth Class Mail has a Dropbox connector. So whenever a new scan happens on Earth Class Mail, that scan is dropped into a Dropbox folder. Zapier, which is my automation service, also connects to Dropbox. So Zapier watches that Dropbox folder, and when a new thing shows up in that Dropbox folder, it generates an email to Nosby. No, not true. It generates a note in Evernote with that PDF as an attachment. Oh, now when that note shows up in Evernote, in my inbox, when anything shows up in the inbox, it gets translated into an email to Nosby that generates the task, right? So we go from Earth Class Mail, paper, to Dropbox, PDF, to Evernote, all the shit in the inbox, to Nosby, a task. And the cows all go home. But, at the end of the day, I don't see any of that, right? All I see is, oh, I got mail. I have paper mail. Yeah. What else? It's a lot, right? Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to, as usual, I'm going to publish this video so that you guys can see it. And if there's anything on here that you'd like to see more of, as in, could you show me how you did that? Just let me know. I'm happy to show you. I've been working on this literally for years, and it will, because it's highly personalized, it's never going to be, a sellable platform, but it is a repeatable process, especially at a high level when you realize that the components of the process are somewhat interchangeable. You don't have to use Evernote. You could use OneNote, whatever, right? So I'm always interested in figuring out how to make the process work, with different components. I'm also interested in refining the presentation, because even though I'll never be able to sell this as a product, I think what I will at some point be able to do is to, sell the lesson, right? So this is me working out my material and trying to get a sense of, where's the interest, where are the questions, and whatnot. So there you have it. If there are no other questions, I'm going to sign off, and thank you very much, guys, for joining me. I hope this was at least interesting, if not directly useful.
Yeah, I'll say thanks, Jason. I think you're on track in terms of the viability for providing somebody a better way of looking at things and how to adapt some technology in a good way.
Yeah, it does work. I use it every day. This is the way I live my life here. So, certainly time tested.
I assume, Jason, you probably just have like this, and really everything is just running through that device, aside from your phone, I guess. But
Ron, I'm sorry, you were kind of cutting in and out there. Could you ask that question again?
You've got like a Surface or something. You've got one device that basically now you've basically built a system. Everything comes in one place, right? Because mail comes in and all of the different apps and everything runs through that. Aside from your phone, I'm sure you have.
Actually, I've got so the two fundamental apps are Nozbe for task well, 3. So Nozbe for task management, Evernote for the info stuff, and then Outlook for email and calendar, right? So those applications are available everywhere. They're on my phone, they're on my laptop, they're in a web browser if I need them. So actually, one of the criteria that I applied when selecting components of the system was, I don't want it to have to matter where I am, and if I lose all my shit, I want to be able to go to a drugstore and get on a kiosk and still figure out what I got to do next, right? I want to be able to do it on your phone.
How do you spell Nozbe?
Nozbe. It is ridiculously cheap. I think it's like $5 a month for 10, something like that.
Yeah, and because it's all cloud-based, whatever device you sit down to, it's all been synced, assuming you're connected.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, so one of the other reasons why I like Evernote a lot, and I think you can do this with OneNote, but I'm not sure, is it's really easy to create a public link to a note. So here, let me give you an example. So this is what you're looking at here. These are the notes that I'm sort of working off of here, right? So I'm just gonna hit a button, and then I'm gonna go to a web browser, and I'm gonna paste it in, and there it is, right? So that the URL that I just used is it's a public URL. It's kind of security by obscurity, right? But what it means is that I can easily share stuff to anybody. And if I added attachments or whatever, they all show up as downloadable attachments on the note, right? So basically, I can organize a whatever, so a good example is like setting up my taxes for my accountant, right? So I just have this big Evernote where I pull in like all the the tax forms and everything, and like they're all kind of laid out as attachments, and then I send it to him, and he can download the stuff, and then meanwhile on my side I can open them up straight from Evernote and work on them and close them, and they get saved back to Evernote, and right. So they've hit a really good balance between this is just a text editor and doesn't have enough formatting power, and this is freaking Microsoft Word and everything's huge and impossible. Like they've got a nice balance in between there, and they've made everything super shareable. So you can also like privately share things with other Evernote users, but I find I don't really use that. I use the public shares a lot more often. So yeah, really like it.
All right, thanks.
You're very welcome. Yeah, and like I said, any other questions, just ping me. I'm happy to share. Okay, guys,
right, Jace,
have a great.
Yeah, thank you. It was real good.
You betcha. Have a great evening. I'll talk to you soon.
Hey, have a good day there, Jace.
All right, bye.
Bye.